Hello, hello. Looks like we're live. Does my mic work? Yeah, my mic works. That's crazy. I have a cat hair on my mic. I have cat hairs everywhere because I have a cat. All right, there we go. So, Advent of Code starts in like 8 days from now. So this is going to be a test stream and a little bit of an Advent of Code warm-up. I think I'm going to try day one from a few years ago. I forget which year, but it's going to be one of the years that I haven't done yet. I've done that before. I did like the first 3 days of one of the older Advents of Code, and I never went to day 4 for that year. So I'm going to pick another year and do day 1, hopefully. Maybe just day 1, part 1, maybe just the first half of part 1, depending on how hard it is. Might not spend a whole lot of time on this. The other goal is to make sure that my stream setup still works, because I haven't done this in like 6 months or more. So that part seems to be working. I think my stream is going. I've got my coffee brewed, unrelated to the stream. All right, so does my Twitch bot work? I think it's running in the background here. Let's get out of Streamception. So you can see the Twitch bot there. If I put something in my other computer where I'm monitoring the stream, there we go. There's the Twitch bot, so that works. So I'm going to be doing Advent of Code in Syntran again, my own interpreted language. Actually, Psy is an alias that nobody else will have, so really it's Syntran. And the first thing I want to do is update the version, because I have released a new version. And of course I built it on this computer, so I could just build it here. But I would want to build it in the release profile, and that takes a minute. So it's actually easier for me to install the official binary release. And I have those now. I did not have those a year ago. So if you go to Syntran on my GitHub, if you look at the tags or the releases, there was a releases button over here. That'll get you basically the same information. I have releases starting with .47 from early September. I've put out a couple things over the past few months in the past year. I have structs in Syntran. That's probably the biggest feature from the last year. And each one of these releases adds a couple little things. The main big thing is structs. I have return statements from functions and other control flow statements like break and continue. And then if you click on one of the releases, you get the release notes. So that tells you what's new. This one really didn't have anything. I fucked up the release before. Actually, I think GitHub fucked up release.54. Because I build the installers on GitHub Actions runners. I don't like build them on my personal computer and then have other stuff run have other people install and run my viruses. So these are built in clean environments on GitHub Actions runners. But I think what happened is that GitHub Actions updated the Ubuntu version that they run these on, and then there were like shared libraries that didn't work on Rocky Linux and Alma Linux, so GitHub fucked up this release, and that's why I made release.55, but all that was a binary repackaging that fixed Rocky and Alma. So .54 is the actual big release. So yeah, like I am out of date. I actually forgot about that. I thought I was missing features, but I'm just missing the ability to install a binary on Rocky. And of course, you can always build this from source if you have a Fortran compiler. That's what I always used to recommend. So yeah, there are a couple issues. It doesn't really work perfectly on Windows. I did a test, and it's like 1 out of every 1,000 times or something crazy, it will crash. It's like a fraction of a percent that it will crash on Windows intermittently. But if you have WSL, you can just install one of the Linux binaries, and those never crash unless you're doing user error or unless you find some other bug that I haven't found yet. Because usually when I find bugs, I fix them. Yep. And if you install a binary, I don't really know if it's going to work on your system or not. I'm going to get to Advent of Code eventually, but because I'm doing it in Syntran, I want to give you guys like a little overview of Syntran. Yep, this is all the stuff that's new in the latest release. And Advent of Code is going to play a big role in the development of Syntran, because I'm going to do as much as I can this year. I'm not going to get 50 stars. I never do. I can't get 50 stars in any language. I'm not smart enough. Syntran is not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is up here. But I can probably get like 40 stars, roughly. And I'm going to take all of those solutions, and I'm going to put them into unit tests for the Syntran interpreter. So there's a good chance I'll find some bugs. Maybe I'll feel like I need to add a feature to be able to do some of these problems the way that I want to. Yeah, so this language is basically Advent of Code driven development. I find bugs, I add features just so that I can complete Advent of Code challenges. There's the bot yapping about something. Yeah. So if you want to install, there are installation instructions. You can get there from the README. You don't have to click that link, or there's that handy little link in the release notes. So that'll take you right to the correct install binary section of the README. And then there are Linux instructions and Windows instructions. It does work on Mac too, I think, but I really don't want to condone or encourage the usage of Mac OS. It's a terrible operating system. Until the last release, all of the Linux installs were the same, but now with Rocky and Alma, they depend on, what was it? Was it libc.so? I forget what I had to include. There's always libquadmath, and I'm playing around with building gfortran, the compiler, from source with quadmath disabled, and then I won't have a dependency on the quadmath shared library. So there's always at least one shared library in the Linux installations. That's why it's a zip file instead of just one executable file. Or not. That might be a limitation of GitHub releases. I think maybe it has to be a zip no matter what, even if you just have one file in it. But yeah, before the last release, there was only this installation section. This works on Ubuntu and a lot of other distros. I test this in Docker files on all of these distros as part of every commit. It only tests the release. It doesn't test the current commit for the binary installations because the binary installers are only uploaded once per release. I have to do that manually. Yeah, and then if you're on Rocky or Alma, and also probably CentOS, but surprisingly not Fedora. I don't know why Fedora is not with its Red Hat-based friends. But whatever. If you're using Rocky Linux or Alma Linux, you have to set your LD library path because there's an extra shared library. I think it's libc.so.6 or something. Who cares? But you have to do that, otherwise it won't run. So I'm going to do this to get the latest release. Probably don't want to do that in my GitHub repo, so I'm going to make a scratch dir and then clean it up afterwards. Downloads pretty fast. It's only like 3 to 5 megabytes depending on which operating system you're installing. You have to use unzip. It's a zip file. I'm not distributing tarballs because this is kind of the default for GitHub Actions. Maybe I'll also give out tarballs in the future, but for now it's a zip, and you have to have unzip installed instead of tar, because tar cannot handle zip files. You can also use 7-zip. That's totally fine and very cross-platform. So that gives you the interpreter and the one dependency, which I might try to get rid of, but to get rid of this, I either have to upgrade to G4tran 14, which doesn't work. I can only use G4tran 12 at a max. Nothing else works with my interpreter. Or I can build G4tran from source with quad math disabled, and then I'll be able to get rid of this dependency. And then the Linux installer will only be one file, and that'll be kind of nice. So we have that. And then I just want to copy this into my path. So why is that my path? I should have it like /user or something, but at least I don't have to be root to do this. And then this should be .55 because I curled, well, it doesn't show you here, it just says latest. This is like a link to the latest release. You can also download a specific release. The URL is slightly different. I think you do releases, downloads, and then the version number. So like these two words are swapped in the URL. So this should be .55, and there we go. .55, that matches the very latest. Well, it's not this one because that's not the latest one. It matches the latest tag and the latest release. The tags are the same as releases. I don't make tags for anything else. Yeah, so I wanted to have the same version everywhere so that if any of my viewers install this, they can also at least have one-to-one bug and feature correspondence. But I think I'm not even going to do this locally, at least not at first. Excuse me. I think I have like a minor cold this week. Also, I'm not really used to talking so much. I'll talk for like 5 minutes at a time for a work meeting, but not just monologuing for an entire stream. So I'm not even going to run this locally. My plan is to try this in Syntran Explorer. So if you go to my website, which you can get to with the Twitch chat links, that'll actually take you to my About page, but then you go to the Syntran tab, and there's a link here to the Syntran Explorer, and you can run stuff in your browser. You don't need to install Syntran. You don't need to build anything from source. You can just put your source right here, and then you can say, let's do advent of code. Control Enter, and there's Hello World. There are other samples up here. Be wary, if you put anything important in here, you might lose it. Like if I refresh the page, you would lose this text permanently. Also, you can change the dropdown, and it looks like I lost my source, but I can actually Control Z to undo and Control Y to redo, but that's not really great because then if you make like one more change, then you can't redo anymore. You can only undo. So you could lose stuff like that either. You could lose stuff like that as well. Excuse me. Yeah, so whatever you type in here, be careful. Probably back it up in some other text file if it's anything that you care about. Or better yet, don't use this at all. Just use this to like play around with, and then install something locally so that you'll never lose your source. Yep. I think it's time for me to get to advent of code. I could spend more time talking about this, but I think we have to get started. Yeah, this is like a cool little way to play around with Syntran if you don't feel like installing anything. It should work on a phone fairly well too. The UI will get squashed down, and you should still be able to run things. So yeah, let's find some advent of code that I haven't done yet. There's 2021, but I think I watched Soding do that on Twitch. So I might not want to do that because even though I haven't solved these problems, I've seen it. So I think I might do 2018 because I have not done anything from 2018 yet. Let's do it. I'm not going to read this stuff. I think this is where the problem starts. Everything above that is like advent of code, introduction. Are you fucking kidding me? I have to sum a list of numbers? Like, I know they're usually easy on day one, but this... Let's wait for part two. But this one feels incredibly easy. You have to read strings. And you have to split by commas if you need to. See how big this is. It's huge. So the problem with the web editor, I'm not sure how I'm going to put my input here. Usually I save it in a file and then read a file, but you can't really do that through here. You don't have reliable access to a file system. So I was kind of planning to only do the sample input, but that's going to be like summing this line of numbers. It's kind of boring. I guess that's all I can do. Because this is a lot of text. I think the web editor is going to choke. I'm using something called Code Mirror as a JavaScript dependency for like the text editing. So I don't know how well that can handle like a megabyte of data here. I think this is a more interesting example. Everything else, I guess this one's kind of interesting, but this one is all ones. It's kind of boring. And this one is descending negative numbers. It's kind of like a predictable pattern. This one is less predictable. So I think that's going to be the sample input. And that's just going to be a string. Usually I would save this in a file and then read it in Syntran, but I can't do that in a web editor, so I'm just hard coding it as a string, and I'm going to treat that as my input. And this doesn't output anything, of course, so let's make some functions that print something. Do I want to do something? I guess I have to consume the return value. There's going to be a part 2 eventually. How do I comment in this? I'm used to using Vim or NeoVim. There's probably some kind of keyboard shortcut. Control/, there we go. And you don't have to select the whole line either. All right. There's some cool keyboard shortcuts in this thing. So there's going to be a part 2, but not yet. So for now, it's just part 1. And this is actually not going to do anything, so I have to call main. It's kind of like Python. If you make a main function, you have to call it. And then might as well return that too. Let's just add some logging so that I know this is doing something. And then so I know it doesn't crash somewhere in the middle, I'm going to log at the end as well. Because if it says starting and then it says nothing else, I don't know if it finished or if it just crashed somewhere randomly in the middle. So there we go. And there's a keyboard shortcut. You can click this button. That's what you have to do if you're using this on a phone. Or you can do Control-Enter as a keyboard shortcut. And that's kind of faster. But then you have to scroll down to see the output. I'm not really a UI guy. There's probably a better way to do this. Maybe like when you run, it should auto-scroll. But then like things are jumping around without you explicitly scrolling. Maybe the output should be to the right side instead of at the bottom. I don't know. I haven't put a whole lot of thought into the web editor here, but it works. I think it looks kind of nice. Not thanks to me, thanks to CodeMirror and random bits of CSS that I copied and pasted from the internet. Because like most of this web page is CodeMirror to like edit the text. And then all I have to do is take that text, send it to a server that's running Syntran, and then send the output back to display down here. So I didn't really do much for this website. All of the hard stuff is in the CodeMirror dependency. Like I said, if you use this web editor, you could lose your source if you accidentally click refresh or something. Some web pages, they'll say like, are you sure you want to leave this page? You'll lose the data that you entered. This does not do that. If you click refresh, it will automatically delete everything immediately without a warning. That's actually in the disclaimer, I think. So I'm going to very carefully open this up in a new tab. I think it opens in a new tab anyway, but I really want to be careful here. So you could lose your source. Be careful here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, Control-A, Control-C. Just having it on a clipboard is like one level of backup, but then I'm actually going to save this in a file locally. So what year was this? 2018. I'm going to call this main web because then I think I'm going to have like a local version too for not the sample input, but the real input, which is too big probably for the web editor. All right, that's saved. Now I have a local backup. And if I fuck something up here, if I accidentally refresh the page, it's okay. I can just paste it in here from my local backup. If you don't do that and you refresh the page, you will lose all of your code permanently with no way to get it back. So once again, be careful. All right. Now, the one and only challenge for this problem is splitting a string and then parsing numbers from it. Or you could just like tokenize and parse in one stage. There are different ways to do it, but I have a split function, so I'm going to use that. And I'm not going to write it from scratch here. This is just a warm-up stream. Even next week for the real AOC, I'm not going to write things from scratch. If I have a function that I wrote last year, I'm just going to copy it and reuse it. So I should have within my tests from last year's AOC, I have something called utils, and this has a lot of like string processing stuff for splitting strings by comma delimiters and then reading numbers out of there. So do I want to just copy and paste all of this? Probably, because the split function, it's not really a standalone function. What does it do exactly? Like, it uses things like scan and verify, and those are other functions that I've defined in here. So I think I have to copy and paste this whole script, which is 700 lines long. It's kind of big. And a lot of this stuff, like sum is built into Syntran now in the last year. But I wrote this a year ago before I had a built-in sum function. So some of this stuff is obsolete now, but I'm going to copy and paste it anyway. Can I select everything? Cool. And usually I would include utils. I would do like include utils.syntran, or whatever the path to that is. It might be like a couple parent folders back with my usual Syntran source layout. But I can't do includes in the web editor because this again depends on the file system. So I'm just going to copy and paste. This is called Syntran Explorer. It's named after Compiler Explorer from Godbolt. This is like a really shitty knockoff, featureless knockoff of Compiler Explorer. This is Syntran Explorer. It's not an edit. It's not an IDE. It's just an editor. Let's be real. Like it shows you the output, so I guess that's integrated. You can do keyboard shortcuts like comment and uncomment, but it's really just an editor. I would not call this an IDE. All right. So let's paste this monstrosity in here, and let's hope that CodeMirror does not choke. And that's going to be like the end of the utils block. Oh boy. Oh boy. Yeah, scrolling is not so smooth. Yeah. I just reflexively controlled est. Didn't really mean to do that. Oh my god. Yeah, so 700 lines of source code. Imagine taking, I don't even know how many. It might be like 700 lines. It's honestly not that big. But some of the later days, they get way bigger than this input. So this is not going to work well in the web editor. Will this run? Still fairly fast. It has to take all of this, send it from my computer to a server, run it on that server, and then send the output back. So it's 700 lines, but it's probably like a few kilobytes of source. So it's really not that big. But it's nice that there's not like a deadly lag here. It's still fairly responsive. All right, now I have to split my string, and then I'm going to have to parse numbers out of it. So I think I have a function in here. Oh god, I don't think Control F works. pretty sure I have something called parse in here. I don't know what GitHub's doing, but GitHub Control F works a lot more smoothly than code mirror Control F. Maybe there's like some other shortcut I should use than Control F. I don't know how to bind these code mirror shortcuts, like Control/ is comment. I think that's the same shortcut that they use in VS Code, but I don't know what the search shortcut would be other than Control F, but that's just like going to the browser. It's not doing something within code mirror. But yeah, I definitely have parse functions in here. Yeah, so I don't even need to split in one stage and then parse in another stage. I can just do that all at once. Read? Yeah, maybe I want that. Because this, oh, that's hex. Oh my god. I forgot that I did this manual hex conversion. That's built into Syntran now. You can just use hex literals. Well, it's from a string. It's really not built in, but you can have hex literals in Syntran. So what the hell is the difference here? We have parse i32 delim. That returns an array of integers, and it takes a string, and it takes delimiters. What the hell is this thing, then? Oh, this is just used by parse. So parse is the one that I want to call. Parse i32. Singular or plural? Parse i32 delim. This is the function that I want to use. So it first takes the string and then delimiters. Let's have like a local variable, because maybe in an alternate implementation, I would read this from a string, or read this from a file, but now it is a global variable. But because I'm doing this in the web editor, it has to come from a string that's hard-coded. Then we're going to get some numbers. And it's parse i32 delim. It takes the string, and then it takes delimiters, which could be commas and spaces, or just commas should work, I think. If I have a little bit of extra white space padding, I think Syntran can still read the numbers there. Then let's see what that does. There's no, I don't know how to like complete the variable name. It's not tab completion. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time fiddling around with code mirror shortcuts. I just want to run this. So let's see what that does. It should print the numbers, which is basically going to be the string, but the type is going to be an array of integers, not just a string. And that seemed to work. You can see that I didn't put a square bracket in my print statement here. I put an equals sign. So there's that. But then this square bracket comes from Syntran because it's reinterpreting the string to a different type. Instead of a string, it's now an array of integers. So that's where the square bracket comes from. And that's how you can tell that this changed the type of the data that I'm dealing with. So that's basically the whole problem. Parsing and reading and splitting the string is the hard part. The easy part is taking the sum. You could do this with a loop. could say like let sum equal 0. And then for I in 0 to the size of numbers, I think we have to do number 0 because it's the first dimension of the array. Even though it's a rank 1 array, there's only one dimension, but you still have to put that number in for the size function call. And then you could do sum plus equals numbers I. And then just print that. And what are we expecting here? I think it should be, what the fuck does this sum to? 3. I could have done that in my head, but it sums to 3. That's what we're expecting. And there we go. It's that easy. But this is actually the hard way to do this. So you don't need to do all this. There's a built, last year, I think I would have had to do it like this, but now there is a sum function built into Syntran. So you can just, and that's why I put an underscore here so that it doesn't conflict with the name of the function, which is just sum without an underscore. And there it is. When I ran it here and then scrolled down, you couldn't really see that I ran it, but you know, now you can see that it's rerunning the code that I just wrote. So it's this easy. Last year, you would have had to do your own sum like this, but now it's a built-in function. So it's just one line. And I accidentally did Control S, but that's a good reminder that it's probably time to back this up. There we go. Now we have a backup. Yeah, that might be about as much as I can do in the web editor, because look at this. This is like 800 lines with all the utils that I copied. There's a lot of stuff in the utils that I don't need. Like I definitely don't need modulo, wrapped modulo functions, and that will still run. So there are unused functions in here that you could strip out to optimize the size of this script. And here, because this used to not be built in, I rolled my own, and that could also be stripped out. So there are a lot of things in here that you could remove to get this down under, like, much under 800 or 700 lines of code. But I don't really feel like doing that. Normally, I would just include the utils and not really even think about how big that is. So yeah, it does not scroll smoothly. Actually, it's scrolling smoother now. I think it like cached things in memory by now, and it didn't at first. So I wonder, can I Control F? No, I still can't find things that I know exist in here because I'm definitely doing this. So now if I Control F when it's on this viewable section of the screen, it will find that, but it won't find the definition of this. I wonder if CodeMirror has a way to like jump to definition. Probably, but I don't know what the keyboard shortcut there is, if there is any. So just to see, let's see what happens if I paste this whole input in here. Oh, there are no commas in this one, so that's kind of annoying. I guess I have to use a different delimiter. Let's see if it can even handle this amount of text anyway. That's okay, so when I switched tabs, the scrolling became not so smooth. Will strings with new lines even work? I'm not really sure. Do we really have a big number at the end there? 130,000? Everything else is like 1 or 2 digits. Is this like a copy and paste bug or a CodeMirror bug? Okay, so we do have some big numbers in here. Then there was another one that I saw while scrolling. Yeah, so we do have some big numbers. Ooh, do I need to use 64-bit integers for this? I might have to. think they probably won't hit me with that on day one, but it's something to think about. Usually at some point in advent of code, you're going to have to use a 64-bit integer. This is weird because the test input had comma delimiters and the real input is new line delimited. And in most languages, it's a lot easier to deal with new line delimited strings than stuff that's all on one line. So this like solves most of the hard part of the problem, which is parsing and splitting this. It's not as hard as the sample input makes it look. I'm probably going to have to change my delimiters. I'm not even 100% sure. Come on, CodeMirror. Not even 100% sure if I can have a string with new lines embedded in it. I think that should work in Syntran, but I'm not 100% sure. And then when I when I parse this and give it a set of delimiters, I'm not going to want to use commas as delimiters. I think I'm going to want to use new lines, if I can remember the ASCII code for that. So this should not work with comma as a delimiter, but let's see what happens. It might just choke on the input. It runs, it does something. It got a 4. Was 4 the first number? Yeah, 4 was the first number, so it did that, and then it gave up on everything else. So I think I can do something like this. Actually, this is a little hacky. That should be a new line. So will this, I don't know if this will work. It might work. Okay, so we got some numbers. I don't really need to print all of those. But I can probably like print a few of them and then do some nice min-maxing or max-minning. Now, you might not even have 10 numbers, so I want min, I want the min of 10 or the size of the array. I think I need a more compact way to do this. Like for a rank 1 array at least, I think I want to have the second argument be optional. And then size will return the product of the extent of every dimension of the array. So if you had a 3x3 matrix and you said size without a second argument, it would say 9 because 3 times 3 is 9. Or if you have a vector, it will just give you the length of the vector. But I haven't overloaded that yet. This is a good idea, which I don't think I've written down yet. So let's say that in the Syntran interpreter. Do I have Syntran stuff open here? This is when I talk about advent of code-driven development. This is what I mean. Do I already have a note for this? Maybe. Non-variadic. No, I don't think I explicitly said this. I've definitely thought this before, but I never put it on my to-do list. I don't know where to put it in the to-do list. The hard part is prioritizing these ideas. So that's a feature that I would like to have in this language. It would make my life easier because then I don't always, frequently I forget to put a 0 here. So you'll see what happens when I do this. It's going to be a syntax error. Function size requires 2 arguments but was given 1. By the way, look at these error messages. Aren't these nice? Imagine Imagine if I wasn't zoomed in so far. It doesn't wrap in a weird way. So requires 2 arguments but was given 1, and it underlines the arguments of the function, which is bad. It says wrong argument count. Oh, and then min. Yeah, then we have like a cascading error because min doesn't actually know what type this is because it's a bad function call. But the main error is the first one. And I think that's fairly clear. So that's what frequently I forget to do this. I forget to give the second argument because for a vector or for a rank 1 array, I'm not really thinking about the fact that there could be multiple ranks. And did that? I don't think I ran this yet. What did I do here? So do I have types? There we go. I have to coerce this 10 into an I64. This is a relatively new feature. Previously, you had to do this with a function. You could do it this way. You could cast the 10 up to I64, or you could cast the size down to an I32. I think this should also work. This is dangerous because the size could be a big number, and then like what happens when you cast a big number down to a 32-bit integer that it doesn't fit into. So that's kind of dangerous. The safer way is to cast the 10 up, and you don't have to do it with a function now. For literals, you can add a type ascription after an apostrophe. I'm worried that maybe the apostrophe looks weird, but this is kind of similar to the way that Rust does lifetimes. I don't know what the fuck a lifetime is, but it's something that they have in Rust. And to give a variable a lifetime in a Rust, you put an apostrophe after the variable, and then you put its lifetime. So that's what I'm doing for types, not lifetimes. I don't know what a lifetime is, but I do know what a type is. And it's important to have numeric literals with a type sometime. So you could have stuff like let x, you can have hex literals. So this should be 255. And when you print just converts everything to base 10. I think I want to have an option to print things and keep them in hex or convert decimal to hex. But I have to think about like a nice interface for that. So for now, it just always prints decimal by default. So this is fine. You can have 255, you can have bigger hex numbers, but what if you have this? This would be the max 4-byte integer, but this is actually an unsigned integer. So what is this going to be? Is this going to be -1? Which is, these are the bits that you would get if you took -1 as a 32-bit integer and wrote it to a file, and then looked at that file in a hex editor. You would see 8 Fs. So is that -1, or is it a positive 64-bit integer? So by default, it's -1, but if you want to do it the other way, you can put a type ascription here, and then it's a positive number. Again, by 32 bits, it's -1, and that's also the default. But if you have actually more bytes here, it's going to be a 32-bit integer, because no matter what you do with this many nibbles, that's not going to fit into 32 bits. But yeah, sometimes, especially for hex literals, it's important to have type suffixes or type ascriptions and not a function. Because if I try to cast this after the literal has already been parsed, it's still -1. If you want it to be a positive number, the only way to do that is with a type ascription, not with a function. So yeah, that's a feature that exists in Syntran now. Anyway, I think we have a solution here. So we're printing numbers, and then we have a sum. So let's see, is that right? Let's go, that's part 1. Let's see how bad part 2 is. Ooh. So we're going to have to repeat the input. Is there a way to do this efficiently? Is there a way to optimize this? Or do I just have to make an array of all of the sums that I've seen and then loop through that whole array on every iteration to see if I've seen this sum before? That's like the brute force way to do it. Is there a better way? The input might be small enough that brute force just works. Usually on day one of advent of code, they don't make you work that hard. So I have a feeling that brute force is just going to work here. But is there an easy optimization? Is my mic still working? I know it was working like an hour ago, but okay. I mean, wouldn't that be embarrassing if like I tested my mic at the beginning of the stream and then like some connection popped loose and I was just on mute the whole time? I would have no idea. But it's still working. All right, let's look at some of the examples. So how does this get to 10? 3, then that sums to 6, and then we get to 10, but that's the first time. -2, -4, that takes us back down to 4, and then +3, that takes us back to 10. Is this like a cumulative sum? Yeah, we're looking at the cumulative sums, but I don't think that helps me with optimization. I've just put a name on what this is. It's a cumulative sum. That's the cum sum button on calculators that every 11th grader likes to laugh at. All right, how does this get to 5? -6, -3 would be the sum after the first two. +5, 10, 4, -2, 1, 9. I feel like I made a mistake. 14, 8, 2, 5. Okay, that does get to 5 eventually. It took a while. I had to loop through the list like 2.5 times. How do you do this efficiently? Because like you don't know how big it's going to be either. You don't know how many times you're going to have to loop through the list. So here's an idea, and I don't think it actually helps. Let's say that somehow you know that 2 is going to be the answer. So you keep track of the cumulative sum. So you have 1. There. I'm calling it the sum, they're calling it the frequency, but frequency is just part of like the plot of advent code. So it's not a frequency, it's a sum. I'm going to call it a sum. I'm not going to call it a frequency. Sum of -1, sum of 2. Let's say you know that this is the answer somehow. What if you reset your cumulative sum at this point and say it's 0? Then we have 1, then we get to 2, then we get to 0. If we're at 0, cumulative sum reset from this point. If we ever get to 0, then we know that it's something that we've seen before, but like I have to keep track of a candidate cumulative sum and reset it at every iteration. So I think it's still brute force, and I don't think that helps me to optimize at all. So yeah, I think I'm just going to brute force this because I've been looking at this for 5 minutes or something, and I haven't thought of anything. So let's just do what I know will work, or at least what I think will work. But before that, I need a coffee refill. So I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. I think I'm gonna do a Zin. That's a thing that I do now. Today's stream is brought to you by Zin. Addictive nicotine pouches. Start your addiction today. Is Twitch gonna ban me for that? It's just Zin. Like, come on. All right. So, I think I have to make a backup of what I have so far. So this is 800 lines. So this only includes the test input, and it doesn't include the new line thing that I just did. So let's back that up. Control A, Control C. Can I even copy and paste this much stuff? Okay, we went from like 800 lines to 1800 lines. It's only like twice as long. It's really not that bad. And then I want to make like a second tier backup of this. So push D. Call that V0. Now, even if I fuck up this file somehow, I still have that other backup file. Because I don't trust that I'm not going to do something catastrophic. Okay, so 459 was part 1. Actually, I don't want to print it like that. Not here. I'm going to do as much as I possibly can in the web. Now it tells me which part the answer is, and I don't really need to see these numbers either. I don't think I need to print that. Didn't I? Is that right? Did I accidentally cut off the end of the sentence, or did I never write it to begin with? Or is there an editor bug that just, like, deleted my text? Honestly, can't remember. I'll have to rewatch the stream to see what happened there. Oh, by the way, this new line is really weird. So you don't have to do it like this. You can also just use the ASCII value. Is it 9 or 10? I think it might be 10. Okay, it's 10. What's 9? I think 9 is tab. If you don't know that, you can look it up in an ASCII table. And then, where's decimal 10? 10 is line feed. So is there a carriage return? 13. Yeah, so the typical new line that I use is 10, and then 9 is a tab. So 10 is LF, line feed, new line. That's why this works. You don't have to hard code your new line as a literal new line in the source code. It looks kind of funny having a multi-line string like that. So I think this is slightly better. And I don't really need to print this. This amount of code is really not fun to work with in the web editor. By the way, I'm not going to do this every day. For the real advent of code in a week, I might do this again on day 1 in the web editor, but then from day 2 onwards, I'm not going to challenge myself like this. I'm just going to use Vim, or any local text editor is also fine. This web editor is really not meant for 800 line scripts. It's meant for like 100 line scripts, and then that can fit comfortably in memory, and then you don't have this weird scrolling where the text has not loaded yet. I kind of want to take this out. I don't even know how to delete this. Might be around here. This is so painful to work with. There it is. Okay, so I'm gonna misclicked. I want to select that whole thing. Now I want to shift click. I think I accidentally control clicked. There we go. All right. Now that's a little bit easier to work with. There we go. So part 1 for the sample input was 3. Yeah, the sample input was 3. And now let's do part 2, and let's just do it the brute force way. I think I can close that tab. All right, let's copy and paste part 1 and make part 2. Reading, parsing, and splitting the input is still going to be the same, so that's why I like to copy and paste part 1 to part 2. And now we're just doing part 1 twice because it's copied and pasted. Now I need to modify it. So first of all, I don't need this junk. Actually, I'm going to clean it up here too. I should have cleaned it up before I copied and pasted. I'm going to leave this bit in. But I'm going to delete it from part 2 because we don't need to have that commented block twice. Okay, there we go. Now, I'm going to want an array of cumulative sums, and I don't know how big it has to be. So we're not just going to sum it. Part 2 is not that easy. Let's say 1,000,000. By the way, this is a new feature. You can put underscores as separators. Like in English or in plain writing, you'd use commas as separators, thousand separators. But in Syntran, like in Rust, you can use underscores for that. So that is, well, that's not going to work because I don't have an answer yet. But this part is valid Syntran. So that's going to be the maximum array size. If I don't find a number at this point, then I need to increase this number and rerun it. That's the way that I'm going to do this. So then I'm going to have an array of cum sums. It's just going to be zeros to begin with, and up to the max size of that array. And then we're also going to have the current cum sum, which is just a scalar. And then we're going to iterate. But we don't know how far we have to iterate. We actually will probably have to loop through this array multiple times. Like for the sample input, it's just 4 numbers. But then you have to start looping through them a second time before you find the answer. For this one, you have to loop through it like 2.5 times before you get to the answer. And I don't know how many times you have to do this one. But it could be greater than the size of the input array. So we can't just loop up to a fixed limit this time. Like in this loop, we just went up to the size of numbers. You might have to do more than that. So I'm going to use a while loop. So we're going to say, while we found the answer, not yet, found is false. And then when we find it, we're going to set that to true and break out of the loop. So while not found, I don't know why it indented like that. It expects me to have parentheses around the condition, I guess. But CodeMirror doesn't really know that much about Syntran syntax. We're going to need an index too. Might even have to be a 64-bit integer. Probably not for day 1, but something to think about. This might have to be I64. I just deleted some stuff. But I'm going to start out with 32-bit and see if that works. And then at the end of this, we're going to increment it. And then when we index the array, we're going to have to do a modulo so that this doesn't, so that the iterator index doesn't overflow the end of the array. So the current cum sum is going to be numbers I modulo I think I don't want to recall size every time. For efficiency, this is an interpreted language. It really doesn't optimize at all. You could probably have a better name for this thing, but let's call it that. And then I don't have to recall the size function every time. I can just use that variable. It might be a little bit more efficient. Maybe not. It might just be a wash. Let's do it like that. And then we're going to take the current cum sum and put that into the array of cum sums. And in that time, we're not going to modulo because we need like a potentially larger array of cumulative sums. And then we have to check if this is if we've seen this before or not. So we're going to have another iterator and another while loop. You could do a for loop, but for efficiency, we might be able to break out of it. Yeah, it's really not going to be any more efficient because for most cases, you're going to have to loop through the whole array because you're not going to find it until the very last iteration of this while loop. So it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to use another while loop instead of a for loop, but a for loop should be just as good. While not found and j is less than I. Yeah. And this indentation sucks because code mirror does not know about syntran. And then we find it when the current cum sum is one that we've seen before. And actually, I think it has to be -1 because we don't want to check the current cum sum because that's always going to be a match. I think that should work. And then what is the answer? I think the answer is going to be I. Six. So it is on step 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's what I printed. But I think the answer that they want is 2. So that's what I should print. I should print the cum sum, not the index of the cum sum. And that's 2, so that's the answer. Okay, so brute force works fine on the small array. Let's see how well that extends to the big array. I don't know if this is going to work, but I can't think of an optimization yet. So we're just going to do it the brute force way. Before I do that, I think it's time for a backup. Okay, so now I have that backed up locally. Copy, comment, paste, end string. Let's see what happens. This might run forever. Do I have a timeout on this? I think I have a 10-second timeout on the web runner. And if your script takes longer than 10 seconds to run, so that people don't math bomb me, this will just abort. But hopefully it doesn't take 10 seconds. It might take 10 seconds. Or maybe my code is wrong. Hey, got an answer. Oh, nope. We got part 1 and then it timed out. So there might be a bug in my code that I could debug by using some of the other test inputs, but it's so annoying to delete this string now that I put it in there. I could undo. I don't really feel like doing that either. So at this point, I'm going to switch. I'm going to stop using the web editor, and I'm just going to run this locally. So I'm just going to run this locally. And it takes more than 10 seconds, apparently. Actually, I'm going to be curious how long this takes to run. There must be some kind of optimization. Excuse me. It's really unusual for Advent of Code to give you a problem on day one that requires a non-trivial optimization. I might need to test some of the other inputs because maybe my code is wrong. So you could do like a pigeonhole optimization. You could say, I expect all of my cum sums to be in some range. It could be a negative number up from some minimum negative number up to some maximum positive number. You could like make a histogram of all those positive sums and then just index into that array. But again, I don't know how big that array needs to be. So it's like a time-space trade-off. You could potentially need more memory. I'm already using a lot of memory. By the way, there should be some error condition where if I is ever greater than n max, this says you overflowed. You need to increase this number and recompile or rerun. It's an interpreted language, so there's no compiling. There's only rerunning. There should be some check for that, but I don't think we're hitting that. What kind of progress are we making? Yeah, so I think I might try this pigeonhole idea. But I just want to see like how slow this is. And this is using tabs instead of spaces, and code mirror did spaces everywhere, so let's at least be consistent. Hey Dinks, how are you? Yeah, it's been a while. I'm warming up for Advent of Code, so I'll stream more in December. Right now I'm doing a problem from 2018 just to warm up and test the stream setup. So it goes pretty fast at first, and it should slow down, because on each iteration, it iterates through another array, and this is going to be like order n squared. So I'm not really noticing it slow down, but it should be slowing down as I increases. And if it ever gets to 1,000,000, this is going to fail. It's going to overflow an array index and hopefully crash or just start printing garbage. But yeah, I think I need to do an optimization. But before that, I'm going to test some of the other inputs. So where does this array end? Let's not do that. What else do we have? So they gave us a few other samples. This one's pretty boring, but should be able to do it. Oh, that's wrong. Why? What happened there? Am I not handling negative numbers or not handling zeros or something? Oh, you're working on a voxel array marcher. That's cool. Yeah, math is hard sometimes. Is it 2D or 3D? .3D. Yep, that's harder than 2D. Okay, so if I can't do this, I have something wrong in my code. So am I reading the numbers? Well, I read the numbers. Oh. This is annoying. So we start with 0. We don't start with the first entry of the array. So I have an off by 1 problem here in indexing the cum-sum array. So we start with 0, then we get a sum of 1, then we get a sum of 0. So this does reach 0 twice. If that's the answer, I can just guess it. It's probably not going to be right. Nope, of course not, but it's so easy to check. So I don't think I need to worry about this edge case. I'm just going to ignore that because apparently 0 is not the right answer. If it was, I would have just guessed it there. Let's try this one. So I'm just going to ignore that bug. $10 reaches 10 twice. Okay, that's good. No bugs yet. This one's a bug, but I'm just ignoring that one because it's not, that bug does not affect the real input. This one should be 5. Whoa. That's 5, that's good. And then this one should be 14. Okay, so I don't think I have any serious bugs. I just need to optimize this, and I'm going to do that with a pigeonhole approach. If you've never heard of pigeonholing, there's an order n sorting algorithm. The problem is it uses memory up to the largest size of the entry of the array that you're sorting. So it requires, it's actually n plus n time. It's not O(n), it's O(n) plus n. But for most other sorting algorithms, the best you can do is order n log n, and this is better than that, as long as big N. Okay, big N is the length, so it's usually big N log big N. So as long as the little n is not huge, pigeonhole is potentially a lot faster than anything like even quick sort or merge sort, which is n log n. So I think I'm going to do something like this to check for repeated cum-sums. I'm just going to have an array of every cum-sum that I've seen so far. And in fact, I think I can just reuse this array, but I'm going to have to index it differently because you could have potentially negative numbers. So I'm going to have to like shift it by n max. So it's going to be 2 times n max because it could be a negative number or a positive number. And then how are we going to do this? Yeah, isn't it crazy that like everybody says the best sorting algorithm is n log n, but then like nobody ever talks about pigeonhole sort. I only found out about this in the last year or two maybe. It does use more memory, and I think it only really works with integers. So like if you're trying to sort floats, you really can't use this for floats because how do you put floats into a bucket? I guess you could look at the raw bits, but then you need like a 4 gigabyte array or something much larger. So it only works with ints or things that are like integers. So how do I do this? I'm not going to put this into my array. Going to do... We have to be careful that the range is not symmetric. So we're going to have like negative nmax up to positive nmax minus 1. Or you could do it the other way and take 1 off of the negative bound. So we're going to have to do I minus nmax plus equals 1. And then we're not going to need this inner loop. So that's the optimization. And then we're going to break out of this loop as soon as one of these is 2 or more. So if we see this come sum once, it doesn't matter. But if we see it a second time, this array entry is going to be 2. And then we can break out of the loop. So found equals, we have to offset by nmax again. So this should still give 14 for the test input, hopefully, if I did this right. Nope. Okay, what did I do wrong? No, I want to index it by the cum sum. Not plural, just the current cum sum. Is that it? Nope, it's not that either. Oh, no, I have to add nmax, not subtract. There we go, and I still get 14. I'm just going to not test anything else. I'm just going to try it on the real input now. So this is not a pigeonhole sort, but it's like taking the idea of pigeonhole because I'm indexing an array by like the range of data that I expect. So like in this case, I still have some hard-coded upper limit. And if any sum was bigger than this would crash. So I should have like some kind of check here that says if cum sum is less than negative nmax or greater than nmax minus 1, I should be like error. You need to increase this limit and rerun it. But I guess I might be lazy and just not even put that in there. But I think we have an answer here. So let's see if that's right. All right, that's day 1 from 2018. That might be it for the stream. Do I want to start to look at day 2? This was just like a warm-up and a test stream, so I don't want to do too much today. Let's add the checking. I want to make this another variable. Is that still the same thing? 65474. What? Is this not an integer? Oh. 65474. Yep, same thing. And then I can do the error checking. So the brute force did not work, but I'm going to leave it in there commented. And then this is really not cum sums. This is really like a histogram of the cum sums. Oh yeah, you got it. You saw my problem before I saw what it was. It's like a histogram. I don't know if there's a better name for this other than histogram. And then if this index is ever greater or equal to this, then we're going to overflow, and we have to say error, like increase that limit and rerun. And max 2, because that's the size of this array. So this is a bad name. I think I want to rename this. But only in part 2, I don't want to rename part 1. So this is a histogram. So now we can do the error handling. And that should be fine. But if I set my upper limit to like 60,000, this should error out. 60,000. Okay, now we have checking histogram overflow. You have to increase this. And this is hard because you don't really know what this upper limit should be. I guess worst case scenario, it would be the sum of the absolute values of all of the numbers. So that could be like an intelligent way that you could set this without ever worrying about overflow. So maybe we can do that to just clean this up a little bit. Sum of the absolute values of all the numbers. The ABS function is now built into Syntran. I did not have this a year ago, but now this is a new feature. That didn't work. Oh, do I only have abs? I only have abs for floats. Why did I do it like that? Is that really what I did? Source intrinsic functions, abs. Huh. Why did I not do abs for integers? That was dumb. I guess I based it off my exponential function, and then I overloaded the exponential function only for floats. Because that's the way that Fortran works. It doesn't let you do the exponential of an integer. And then I just copied and pasted that for abs. So that's going to go into my to-do notes. So I should overload abs for I32 and I64. Hey, Fishy Codes, how's it going? Welcome to the stream. I think I might be almost done here. I did Advent of Code 2018 day 1, and this is just like a test stream to make sure that my setup works, and kind of a warm-up a week before 2024 Advent of Code really starts. So I think I've accomplished that. I could do the sum manually. And I want this to work for arrays too. I could do some hacky casting. That might work. Let's give it a buffer actually, because this might introduce rounding errors. So 1.1 times, and that's going to be safely greater than any possible rounding error. Not yet. Hopefully I can add this soon. I'm going to take all of my ideas that I think of while doing these Advent of Code challenges, and then I'm going to put in new features into Syndrain, and maybe fix some bugs if I find any bugs. Because I'm practicing Advent of Code driven development for my interpreter. I think this might work. Okay, and now we have like a dynamic upper limit. So hopefully this doesn't overflow ever, but I'm going to leave the overflow check in there just in case I did my math wrong there for the rounding errors or something. So yeah, I think that's it. I guess I might commit this. Do I have like trailing white space anywhere? I do have it in a few places. Delete all of this trailing white space. And then I don't need to print all of these eyes. I think that's it. Part 1 and part 2. I don't really need to print this either. Might as well not print these because they're just confusing. This is an error message, so I do want to print that unconditionally. All right, I guess I might commit that. What did I do in utils? I think I put like a comment for myself. Yeah, I think this modulo wrapper is not quite correct, but it worked for whatever I needed it for last year. And I don't really need this one. And I think I want to rename this to not web. Is there git rm? Will this untrack it, but then not delete my file? How do I unstage this? Do I have to do rm --cached? And then it's still there, but it's untracked. So that's what I wanted. Let's just call it main. It doesn't need to be main-web. And that's still the same answer. And the diff is showing, oh no, I need to add this again. So this doesn't exist anymore, right? I just want to add this one, but not the other one that I carefully ignored or unstaged. Is it actually going to commit something for that? I hope not. I'll clean it up afterwards if so. All right, let's make sure that I actually pushed that. This is a different repo. This is AOC Syntran. I don't even remember which repo I'm in. All right, I think it's there. I added a git ignore. I added a random comment here. I probably added this comment like a year ago. That wasn't recent. But then I have this, and because I started out using this web-based IDE, now that I optimized it, I should be able to run it in the browser. Let's see if that works just for fun. Will this copy work if I selected it not using my mouse? There we go. It runs in the browser now. For anybody who just joined, I have a website here where you can play with Syntran, the Syntran language, without installing anything locally. You can just run stuff in the browser. So I wouldn't use this normally for advent of code when I have to like hard code huge inputs that are 1,000 lines long. But just for fun, I wanted to see if this web editor would work and not choke on that amount of data. So it does seem to work. And then there are other samples here that you can play around with so that you can learn Syntran syntax. You can run these samples, you can change them. So you can play with Syntran. This is my interpreted language. You can play with it here without installing anything locally. Yeah, I think that might be it for today. What time is it? It's almost noon. I told people I was going to be streaming until like noon, so I don't want to leave too early. But yeah, I think I'm done for the day. I've accomplished my warm-up. I've accomplished my stream setup test. Thanks, Dink. Have a good one. Yeah, I think that's it. So December 1st is a Sunday, and it's the Sunday after Thanksgiving. So I'm actually going to be traveling on this day, on the first day of the actual advent of code. So I'm going to try to stream, but depending on how my traveling goes, I might not. I might just, I don't know, I might do day one offline, or I might just skip it. But I'll at least be streaming by December 2nd. So once again, I'm going to see how far I can get in advent of code with Syntran. I'm not going to get 50 stars. I'm not smart enough to do that in any language, but I can probably get like 30 to 40 stars. So yeah, look forward to that next month. All right. Thanks, guys. I think this is going to be it for the stream. I will catch you next time. Bye.